Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the third rendition of the virtual SOF Team Room series. My name is Michael Halterman, but all my friends call me Halty, so I hope by the end of the evening, you will call me Halty as well. I spent 20 years in the United States Marine Corps as an infantryman, a sniper, and I finished my time as a Marine Raider. Today, I am the Vice President of Operations at the Honor Foundation, a national 501c3 nonprofit organization who has one mission: to serve special operations members with honor for life, so their next mission is clear and continues to impact the world, which is why I'm honored to be here today as the Master of Ceremonies for this team room. If you aren't familiar with the SOF Team Room series, we had our first event in November of 2021 due to the need for the honest conversation about the impact of 20 years of global war on terror and the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But we knew we needed to have more conversations and cover more topics. Our second event focused on relationships with impactful speakers like Tom and Jen Satterley and the SEAC, Ramon Lopez. Today's event will cover a variety of community issues, but the overall theme is about transition from active duty service, excellence in service, and excellence in the second portion of your life. These virtual team rooms are a place for candid conversations on tough topics. When you leave the team room, you leave knowing your community walks this path with you and the helpful information in hand so you can continue to strengthen the SOF community by continuing to have candid conversations at home and in your team rooms. We'll be here together for the next 2 hours with more formal keynote followed by 3 quick health sprints, then closing with a roundtable panel discussion. We'll hit on topics that my peers and I, our families, and others in the community have been discussing often. If you have been in the SOF Team Room before, you'll notice that we're trying a slightly different format today. This Zoom event hub has 3 different sessions listed on the side, and you can click into each one as it begins. You can also watch it all happening from the lobby, which I think many of you just might be, because we have 41 that I can see, but you can't participate and ask questions from the lobby. After this opening session, we'll switch gears to be a little less formal, and we'll do 3 back-to-back-to-back health sprints. To get to those, you will click on those webinar, and you will click out of this webinar, and into the health sprint Zoom meeting. That will be like a standard Zoom meeting we're all used to, where you can see everybody. Sprint 1 is our SOF connection. Sprint 1 is our SOF connection breakout, which will focus on substance abuse and suicide prevention. This will be led by Tom Spooner, co-founder of Warrior Heart. Sprint 2 is our health and performance breakout, which will focus on topics on the minds of many SOF members, veterans, and families, the effects of high allostatic load, also known as operator syndrome. That session will be led by Dr. Chris Free, Dr. Brian Stepanko, and Dr. David LeMay. Sprint 3 is our SOF mission and transition breakout. And this one will focus on transition with intent, led by Tommy Stoner, Chief Executive Officer of Special Operations Transition Foundation, also known as SOTF. Then at around 8:30 p.m., we're going to ask all attendees to click into the last webinar session to watch the closing discussion. You won't want to miss it because it brings together all the key speakers from the day into a collaborative recap conversation. When in doubt, just stay on track with everything you see in the lobby in the hub. Before I introduce our first speaker, I need to thank our SOF Team Room sponsor, SOFTAC Solutions. They are a global SOF Foundation small business partner who generously stepped in and supported this event. You can learn more about them under the sponsor tab under this event. That's enough from me. Now I'd like to introduce our opening panel. First, we have Lieutenant General Jim Slife, the commander of Air Force Special Operations Command located in Hurlburt Field, Florida. The command is the Air Force component of the United States Special Operations Command, and many of you know it as AFSOC. AFSOC provides Air Force Special Operations forces for worldwide deployment, and an assignment to Unified Combatant Commanders, and has approximately 20,800 active duty, reserve, Air National Guard, and civilian professionals. We also have Command Chief Master Sergeant Greg Smith on the line. Chief Smith is the 10th Command Senior Enlisted Leader of the United States Special Operations Command, better known as SOCOM, at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida. Both of these gentlemen have been great supporters of the host foundations here today, and we are thrilled to have them. They will be joined by SOF Team frequent flyer, Dr. Chris Free, who will guide the conversation. Dr. Free, over to you.
You got to unmute, Dr. Free.
Thank you. Thank you, Halty. And so General and Chief, thank you for being here with us today. And I think I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I'm not gonna say any fancy words to get us started with. I'm just gonna kick it off. Let's talk about transition. So you guys are very familiar, sort of, because you haven't gone through it all the way yourself yet. But you probably have some strong familiarity with the challenges that are faced by many. So I guess my question is, how should leaders be helping their units focus and prepare for this transition? General, start with you.
Well, thanks very much, Dr. Free, and thanks for the introduction, Halty. I was a little disappointed that the less formal portion of this evening's event happens after this opening session. I would really rather be part of the less formal thing than the more formal thing. Dr. Free, to the point about how leaders manage transitions, I think one of the things that every leader has to do everywhere is always set the example. And the reality is that every one of us as military members are going to transition at some point. And so it should not be taken as a sign of disloyalty or abandonment or whatever when people come time for whatever reason, whether it's mandatory time to transition or whether it's just the natural time in their family or their personal life or they wish to pursue other opportunities. We shouldn't treat it like they're quitting. And frankly, I get irritated when somebody talks about separating or retiring from the military and somebody jokingly says quitter. The frustration I have with that is most of us feel some intense loyalty to our organizations and our teammates. And deep down, if we're really honest with ourselves, we probably do feel a little bit like we're walking away from some unspoken obligation. And when somebody verbalizes that, it just makes it that much harder for the person to work their way through the transition process. And so I think as leaders, we have to set the example. We have to talk about our own transitions. We have to not stigmatize people who are preparing to transition. As long as somebody has fulfilled their whatever service commitment they have to their service, my view is the first words out of our mouth every time somebody talks to us about transition is thank you for your service. How can I help? And so I think really that setting the tone for the organization and then setting the example in our own transitions are probably the things I would highlight as key leader behaviors in this area.
Chief Smith.
Well, thanks, Dr. Free, for that. And it's always difficult to follow General Slife, as I've spent the good majority of my career, trying to avoid the wake turbulence of trying to follow a great leader. We as leaders, in a lot of ways, set conditions for three things. And that's the onboarding of how we bring people in to our formations, the sustainment of those members and their families if we do our jobs right, and then setting conditions for transition. And transition for everybody is unique. Everybody, again, I have not gone through, I'm going through it right now, but everybody has their own story, good and bad, on how the anxiety levels, the different challenges that they found. And it usually revolves around three things. It revolves around medical, of I have either spent an entire career hiding or preventing the exposure of my different medical issues because it's going to pull me off the teams or take time away from my operational requirements. My family and career, because this is all I've known, and I and my career have become one, hopefully with my family there. And now I'm looking at a new career and a new identity. And then the third one is finances, of the instability that comes with no longer that paycheck of what's my next life going to be. And so how do those things work? So really it's finances, identity, if you will, and then medical are those kind of three areas that, and there's more. And I rely incredibly, there's a tremendous reliance that I have on organizations like all those represented here that help bring these issues to the forefront, because all I can do is hopefully rally the resources and availability of those things. So as each person begins that journey, we as the command or as a leader or as an organization can help set conditions to ease each of those areas of what are some best practices on medical, what are some best practices for resumes and preparing for the next career, and how well did we set our finances to limit the anxiety associated with it. I don't think we as SOCOM do a good job of this right now. I think we do a better job than the services per se, but I think we have a long way to go. And I look forward to this journey with each of you as both I go through it as a transitioner and as a leader responsible for it.
Thank you. Thank you for that very thoughtful response. So the next issue I want to talk about is health and wellness. And we have a pretty good, I think, database, collectively speaking, that many service members from the SOF community leave service with a collection of pretty significant and interrelated health, psychological, social problems. And, this kind of leads off with traumatic brain injury, which almost by definition, the amount of blast wave exposures experienced by most operators is very high. So traumatic brain injury, cognitive deficits, hormonal dysfunctions in the endocrine system, such as low testosterone, chronic pain, sleep apnea rates seem to be very high. And then you get into the depression, addiction, some PTSD, and then you have the social effects, the second and third order effects on marriages, families, employment, schooling, and preparation for this transition. So we're kind of coming together, I think, at an inflection point, kind of struggling to figure out what to call this, how to think about it, how to address it. A lot of service members get out of the service, and maybe even towards the end of their service, are kind of confused and puzzled by the way they're feeling and functioning. And a common phrase I hear all the time is, I don't know what happened. I'm just not myself anymore, and I don't even know where to begin. And so I guess I and many others have been calling it operator syndrome. Others call it allostatic load, which I think is a relatively good descriptive term for it. What are your thoughts on this? How do we address this? What do we need to know and to do? And maybe I'll go with the same order. Let you go first, General.
Well, thanks. Hey, I am really glad that there's so much research being done in this area. And so I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but I can tell you what I see, both what I've experienced myself as an individual growing up in the SOF community, but also what I see in my teammates and the people I lead and that kind of stuff. And I think you used a word that is really key when we're talking about this, Dr. Free. You used the word interrelated. And I think that is critical to understanding what's going on with many of us. And the way I describe it, and I'm not saying I've got this right, I'm just saying this is the way I describe it, is three overlapping circles, kind of a Venn diagram of three circles that represent three types of injuries that are common in our formations. And the first one of those you mentioned is neurocognitive injury. This is TBI, it's blast exposure, those types of things. And so this is, physical damage that happens to an operator's brain because of the environments and the missions that they've been exposed to. And I think that manifests itself in the ways that you described. But I think there is a second type of injury that many times manifest the same way, in some of the same ways, and you get an interrelated nature of these injuries. And that second one is psychological injury. And so psychological injury are things that, we talk about it as post-traumatic stress. It is the result of witnessing or experiencing something traumatic. This is my teammate was killed. I had to watch him die. I couldn't do anything to stop it. This is a traumatic experience. I keep waking up in the middle of the night thinking about, with a nightmare about, I was in the mission and I just couldn't get out of the room fast enough or whatever. But these types of injuries are psychological injuries, and they manifest oftentimes in the same way, I think, as these neurocognitive injuries. But the third one is the one that I think is least well understood. And frankly, I would like to see more research in this area, and that is moral injury. And so moral injury, I think, makes people uncomfortable sometimes because it feels like we're about to talk about religion or spirituality or something. And I don't think it's necessarily that, but moral injury are the things that we experience when we act in ways that are counter to our moral system of beliefs. And so, I did this thing when I was deployed, and at the time it felt like the right thing to do. But as I, look back on it, I wonder if I did the right thing. I suffer from this, from lives that I've been party to taking in combat. And in the moment, it feels like this is the right thing to do. But in retrospect, I wonder, did I do the right thing? Did I take the precautions that I needed to? And I think those moral injuries often manifest in similar ways to the psychological injuries and the neurocognitive injuries. And so I really appreciate the focus that you have put on this. I don't know that I would call it a syndrome. It might be. I think that may come with some baggage if we tell somebody that they have a syndrome. But to me, the way I like to think about it is these set of interrelated injuries that our operators are prone to experience, and we need to kind of treat them as three different things.
Yeah, I'll dovetail off of that for the interest of time. And I know that we're only going to be able to get to kind of wave tops of this and introducing, and then hopefully the health sprints and follow on next month, we'll be able to really deep dive each things. But building off of what General Slife eloquently stated, we're doing a lot of partnerships right now, and you can tell by the comments, everybody has a thought process on this, and everybody has an experience on this. The problem is they're not all synchronized, right? So it's how do we synchronize the overarching Venn diagram of these things that are common to all in terms of exposure, whether it's physical, cognitive, neurological, those pieces. Right now, 3 programs the VA is working on right now is we're trying to tie 6 regional VA centers together. Here at the Haley Center, up in Richmond, up in Minneapolis, down in San Antonio, out in Palo Alto, and then one more. And those are going to specialize in kind of special operations, traumatic brain injury exposure, similar to what you would see at NICO. Programs like Thrive, like I see in the comments that Kaylee just brought up, are all important. NICO, Thrive, the Intrepid Centers, putting and synchronizing all of these things together to help us quantify the types of injuries that we are seeing in cognitive load, if you will, based on something that we all are familiar with. And that is a nocturnal, high op-tempo schedule, whether it's in the air, on the ground, or in the sea, right? Coupled with, high impact, repetitive, low level blast, if you will, things that affect blood phenotypes, blood markers, lobes on the brain. There's 3 ways that we suffer some sort of traumatic brain injury, and that's through our eyes, through our openings, or through wave through the eustachian tubes and up, as we're learning a lot about. Harvard Medical and Tampa General, Massachusetts General, have partnered on a pretty good study that we are really, really latching onto right now, because it's starting to give us some indicators that will branch out and how we can see deeper and further into the brain for these long-term effects that we couldn't normally see before. So what is the impact over time? And then how do those things affect neurocognitive functioning, like General Slife brought up? So how do I onboard you to get a baseline? How do I track you throughout your career and monitor that? and then transition. And then what I'm doing now is working with the VA to try and get 2 years backwards and have active duty be able to go 2 years forward. So I'm now 18 months. I saw Chad McCoy up, in the participants piece. I'll use someone like Chad, who's now, a year, 18 months past. He should be able to still reach back to an active duty provider that hopefully he knows and trusts. Right now, legally, we do not have the mechanism to do that because he's post-transition. So and I'm not saying Chad does, but he, in this example, may not have anybody to reach out to. So how do I keep, how do we keep the connectivity between that team room into those first couple of years of transition? And then if you're in crisis, you can reach back to where we have the legal authority to acutely treat you and get you referred to the right places. This goes to the trust, which ties our veterans and SOF for Life together with our active duty teams that we own. I'll stop there.
I just learned a whole lot. I didn't know about some of those initiatives, so that's great to hear. We are at time now, or just about at time. So I think I'm going to see if Halti is ready to move on to the next step of the program. Halti, can I hand it over to you again?
Yes, Dr. Free, you absolutely can. What I just heard from all of that is we have caring leaders who are engaged and see the opportunity and are creating inroads to make things better for the force. That's what I heard from all of that. So thank you very much, General Slife and Chief Smith. Those were very important comments. It's great that we have as many people in here hearing that from leadership as we do. And Chris, Dr. Free, thank you for leading that discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a very short break to transition to the health sprints. If you're watching from the lobby, you can stay right where you're at. But if you'd like to interact in the next, in the health sprints, you have to log into them. And it'll be much more like a regular Zoom meeting at that point. If you'd like the chance to speak, you have to log in, and that'll start at 7:30. So take a couple of minutes, grab some water, and we'll switch over to Zoom and we'll kick that conversation off. The first sprint, SOF Connection Breakout, which will focus on substance abuse and suicide prevention and be led by Tom Spooner, co-founder of Warrior's Heart. See you all there.